When I arrived at the school in a small village about 100 miles north of Nairobi, no electricity, no running hot water, but with a tremendous sense of warmth and hospitality. But one thing struck me. When I arrived, my Kenyan colleagues who taught at the school, my expectation from my pond, when are they going to invite me to their house? I'm a newcomer. Many of us, when we have a neighbor that moves in, we kind of say hello, invite them over for tea, right? So I was kind of wondering, why are they not inviting me over to say hello, welcome? They were certainly friendly at school. And so I began to imagine, and I began to tap into the narratives. It was 4 years after independence of a very difficult anti-colonial guerrilla war, the Mau Mau Rebellion that some of you may remember. And so I thought maybe they're not inviting me over because there are still bitter feelings about white people, European, whatever that means in the broad generic sense. Maybe they're not inviting me over to their home because they think all Americans are wealthy. In fact, one student said to me, given the power of the American media, "Who's taking care of your horse?" And so I thought, gee, maybe I said something that was offensive. Finally, I decided to invite them over. To make the story very brief, we had a lovely evening, I thought. And of course, I was wondering a week later, why haven't they invited me back? Right? That was my pond. And so in those days, the way we socialized, this was before technology and people being absorbed by smartphones and being paralyzed their eyes in a phone half the day, you'd go to a local bar and you'd talk. You'd spend 2 or 3 hours talking to a human being. And so after a few beers, truth be told, I basically said, did you have a good time at my house? That night, we seemed to be enjoying each other. You told me a lot about Kenya. I was able to explain certain things about the United States, et cetera, et cetera. They said, "Oh, Joe, it was a great night." I said, "Well, how come you haven't invited me to your house?" And they looked at me in disbelief and they said, "We don't invite people over to our homes because the door is always open." How true it was. Invitations are gratuitous, unnecessary, and so of course I tried to test it out. Right? The Peace Corps encouraged us to explore new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking. And so every single time I went to a colleague's house or a friend that I'd met in the market, every single time the door was open and people started cooking. So much so that you would have to calibrate how many times you wanted to visit people in the village because you couldn't eat that much. So the notion of invitation was completely different.